jump right to it. I don't want to waste any precious time. We'll make it official. Hi and welcome to the Dramatist. We have the extraordinary Kemp from Los Angeles. He is right now the hottest it boy in Hollywood.
You're right.
Come on. I mean, I'm dying to know your story. I mean, I think when I met you like 6 years ago, you were this sort of mild-mannered newsman, playwright, storyteller, and kind of flying under the radar a little bit, right?
I'm still mild-mannered. I'm still the same dude, just still pretty much flying under the radar, man. Most people can't pick me out of a crowd.
Sweet. Well, tell me a little bit about how One Night in Miami happened.
Well, it was actually, it was the play I wrote. The first production of the play was in 2013 at Rogue Machine Theater. In their, God, I guess they're 2 locations ago, back when they were on Pico off of La Brea. That was the world premiere of the play, and it did really well locally. It was nominated for a bunch of awards and won some awards, including the Ted Schmidt Award from the LA Drama Critics Circle and an NAACP Theater Award. And it really kind of, put me on the map as a playwright. I'm very lucky in that it generated a lot of interest from other theaters around the country. So, with a play, you never know if you just get a world premiere, like that's a big win, but you never know if your world premiere is going to be the only production, you know what I mean? So I was lucky with One Night in Miami in that it was just the beginning of several really quality productions. We had a great run in Baltimore at Center Stage Theater. We had a great run at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. And eventually it made its way to Miami itself, which was pretty cool to have it staged on South Beach. Made it overseas. It was produced in Johannesburg at the Market Theater.
Right?
London was probably the most, I guess, high-profile production at the Dunbar Warehouse. That was the one that got nominated for the Olivier, and it's just been a really fun ride. I mean, honestly, I tweaked the play between most productions and didn't really lock in the play in the form that it is now until the Dunbar production. That became kind of like the production of record. That was the first time that we published it, and continued writing other plays. And as any playwright in Los Angeles is doing, you start kind of dabbling in film and television. For me, it was my second go around. I kind of was dabbling a little bit in it when I first moved to Los Angeles back in 2003, but it wasn't the most fun experience. So I just went back to journalism full time. This time, journalism's been contracting for many years, and I think when I just coincidentally the timing was perfect when I got laid off, which is something that's had never happened to me in my journalism career. When I got laid off on my last job at Yahoo, I was a front page news producer. That coincided with when with One Night in Miami kind of just picking up steam. So I was very lucky. I had some severance pay. I had vested stock. So rather than just jump into another job, full-time job, I really decided to kind of take a flyer on myself and commit to trying to make this work in my creative writing career.
Nice. Where is One Night in Miami in the chronological order of your plays? Is it third, ninth?
First.
Your first play?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody watching is going to hate you just a little bit, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, first full length play. I mean, I've written a lot of short plays, like 15-minute plays and 20-minute plays, but yeah, first full length play was One Night in Miami.
So what made you decide to write this play? What was the impetus? What was the spark?
Well, I mean, it was a real night. That night really did happen. And when I first made the discovery that night happened, I was still a journalist. So my intention was to write a book about the friendship between these 4 icons, between Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke. And it was one of those things where I'd done years of research, and the research was just gathering dust in boxes because I never got around to writing the book because I hit walls at certain points. I don't really know much about what they said in the room, things like that. The very things that were kind of perfect material for fictionalizing in the world of, a play. And I had been writing a lot of like doing a lot of 24-hour play festivals and short play festivals when John Flynn, the artistic director of Rogue Machine, asked me if I had any full-length play ideas, and he specifically was interested in something historical. I think the way he put it, he would have loved to have seen someone write a play about the Freedom Riders, was what he told me, and I was like, yeah, that's an interesting subject, but that's not the kind of play that I would write. That's not, and he was like, well, what kind of play would you write? And I brought that up. I was like, well, there was this night in 1964 after Cassius Clay beat Sonny Liston. He was in Malcolm X's, hotel room with Sam Cooke and Jim Brown. And the next day he announced that he was a Muslim. And I was like, the play would just be in real time and just stay in that room. It felt very, 12 Angry Men, you know what I mean? Like just kind of stay in one location, very easy to stage. So that was that was the first time I felt like the subject matter really merited writing a full length play.
Well, and you've got these larger than life characters. I mean, that had to just be so much fun. Were there any obstacles? How did you create your story arc and your?
Well, it's interesting. It was just the main question I had to answer for myself was like, what was the central conflict going to be? Like, what was this? I didn't just want to write fan fiction. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, okay, imagine you have these four guys, now do whatever you want with them. And that was part of the problem in, early drafts, kind of like starting to share it with people, like sharing it with a couple of writing groups and getting notes. People would give you notes that would basically just be pitching the story they'd want to tell, and I tried to tell people again and again that I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. I'm using everything I know about these guys that's happened to them up to that night and everything that I know that happens to them after that night to inform the central conflict and the story of what's going on. I don't want to just say, well, if you get these guys in a room, wouldn't it be fun to do this? Or wouldn't it be fun? I'm like, no, I'm actually trying to do characterizations of them that while the dialogue is fictional, the characterizations, I want them to feel realistic. I want people to believe that each of these men would say and do all of these things that they say and do in the room. So that was the big challenge. But again, I think I'm lucky in that my previous career as a journalist and a reporter, I'm not afraid of the research element of it, the research component. In fact, that's what I enjoy the most, doing all the digging, doing all the research, playing around with things like dialogue, going over countless hours of interviews and kind of making notes of specific phrases, for specific terminology that each one of the men uses. Like these were all things that I had a lot of fun doing. The anxiety comes with the first time you share it with people and they go, well, I thought this was a Muhammad Ali play, and I'm like, no, it's an ensemble play. If anything, Muhammad Ali is a little bit of a Trojan horse because the central conflict is between Sam Cooke and Malcolm X. And I think that's not what some people wanted to see in a play. They wanted to see a Muhammad Ali play. And it's like, no, I never had any intention on doing this as a Muhammad Ali play. It was about four friends, who happened to be nascent icons, of the Black Power movement. But on this night, I want to treat them just as four friends.
That's so great. So when you adapted your play into a screenplay, I mean, obviously, you were able to open up your world,
right?
But did the story shift at all?
It shifted quite a bit, actually. I mean, the one thing that didn't shift is I wanted the central conflict of the story to still take place with the four guys in the motel. Of course, the movie isn't just in the room. They move all throughout the motel. They go to the diner. They go to the roof. They move through the motel. I wanted to retain that. But absolutely, the story changed quite a bit. It's interesting because, in writing the film, I kind of as a screenwriter, which I moved into doing, you're often given books as source material. And I challenged myself. I said, I want to treat my own play as nothing more than source material. So it wasn't about remaining, aligned with the play exactly. In fact, I think the most popular couple of moments in the play never even made it into the film. Like everyone's favorite part of the play is probably the show-stopping moment when we recreate Sam Cooke performing live at the Harlem Square Club. That's not even in the movie because it doesn't serve the story I wanted to tell in the film. which is very much more focused on Malcolm X driving the whole thing forward. And you get to see some of the outside influences on each of the men in a way that we weren't able to do for the play. So it is quite a bit different, more different than I even expected it to be when I started writing it.
Wow. So you didn't have a problem killing your darlings.
Not at all. I mean, again, I credit all this to journalism, man, and getting a nice tough edit where you're like, oh man, is any of my like I am not precious about my own words. I'm totally happy to just, if it doesn't serve the story, it's gotta go. There's only 2 or 3 things in the whole play that I felt like, okay, this has to make it into the film. But it's more because, what's the point of even telling the story if those things don't make it in there? It's not from a like, I'm so in love with, the words or exactly how I worded it.
Yeah. So you were on set during the film?
Yeah, not with the primary principal photography was about 7 weeks in New Orleans and around New Orleans, and I was there for about like 3.5, 4 weeks of it. So because we were in
final say on the text.
What's that?
Were you final say? Did they come to you and say, we have a question, we have a decision? Did you get to make that, or was
Yeah. I mean, I was also an executive producer, and there was no other writer involved in the film. So yeah, I mean, I was the writer guy there. So even if I wasn't on set, then Regina would email me or call me up and be like, hey, we're bumping on this part. Can you take another look at it? Or like, what do you think of this? And I might do a quick change or tweak or punch up or something like that. But yeah, I was definitely I was the sole writing resource, which par for the course when you're doing an indie film. I mean, of course, we're being distributed by Amazon, but it's important for people to understand the film was made completely independently and then was sold to Amazon. So
oh, wow.
It was very much an indie production.
Who came to you? Who said, I want to make this a film?
The producers who produced it, that's Snoot Entertainment, that's Keith Calder and Jess Wu Calder. They actually saw the original production in Los Angeles and approached me way back then. They were like, hey, would you consider adapting this into a movie? And back in 2013, I was like, hell no, there's no need. I've got a play, it's supposed to live as a play. But to their credit, they were pretty dogged and like would check in every 6 to 12 months saying like, hey, any interest in adapting that into a movie yet? And of course, Abco Films and Abco Records, Jody Klein, that's actually the record company that owns all of Sam Cooke's music. They also came in the very, very beginning with their original production and came on board as a producer of the play. So, those two groups, those two producers are the same ones in the beginning who took it all the way across the finish line all those years later.
Wow. Now, this has happened to me, and I'm curious, did anything happen in the development, any of the productions or the film? Was there anything that happened that surprised you, that an actor maybe brought into the room?
Oh yeah, of course. There's I tell people, the stage productions really each production really informed changes to the characterization that might seem subtle, but to me were a huge deal. And in many cases, like I remember the specific actor and the specific production and the director and the decision they made that I was like, you know what? That's going into the script. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the joy of stage, of playwriting, isn't it? Is that it really is collaborative. You're learning, like the director is putting a piece of themselves in it. The actors are definitely putting a piece of themselves in it. And you learn, I mean, I could write a first draft of a play, but I don't really understand what's working and not working. Not someone else has read it, but until I've done a table read with actors, just a cold read. And just from one cold read, it is amazing. Like that one cold read of a first draft is more valuable than 20 workshop sessions with a bunch of writers. You know what I mean? Where it's just, you just got to hear the words out loud and you automatically can tell for 75% of it what works and what doesn't. And that kind of can really, it's just very valuable. I mean, other writers are valuable too, but nothing is more valuable than hearing your own words, because the way actors interpret it, I think, goes into the ultimate final characterization of the character in the play. So, and it's so funny that by the time I got to writing it as a film, those characterizations are basically the culmination of all those different performances and all those different productions up until I think the very last production before we went into doing the film was in Pittsburgh at City Theater in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And I actually flew out there. They brought me out because they were also doing a reading of another play of mine. So they had a little grant and they brought me out and I got to be there for opening night. And you know how it is when you write a play after the first few productions, you often don't go see your own play anymore. So, it was like unusual that I was even going to see the play. But then I saw it and there were some decisions that were made in the staging of that play from, I guess, the combination of the director and the actors, because I wasn't there for their rehearsals, that I was like, that's a really, like, I had never thought of that. That's a really good idea. Very, very subtle things that, once again, I worked it into the film script.
That's awesome. It's been so interesting because on Facebook, I've been following you and following the development of this play when you're announcing a new production here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been, it was cool watching this. And then one day I see the trailer for this Pixar film and I'm watching it. I'm like, I can't wait to see this film. I'm so excited. And then it gets to the end and I see your name. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. How did One Night in Miami lead to Soul, or were they completely independent paths?
They did, in a way, in that One Night in Miami was one of the two samples of my writing that Pixar read that made them want to meet with me. But it was One Night in Miami, the play, because no one had read the film script yet. I actually finished the draft of the film script 3 days before my first day at Pixar back in 2018. So no one had read the film script at that time, but they read the play and they also read an unproduced pilot that I'd sold to FX that didn't get produced, obviously. And yes, those were the things that made them bring me in for Soul, because I think, generally speaking, the reason there's been such a massive number of playwrights moving into Hollywood these days is that I think people, rightly so, see the strength in playwrights of writing strong character. So, obviously you see a lot of that a lot more of it in television than in features. But in the case of, Pixar, it's a company that's known for incredibly rock solid stories, but also these powerful, memorable characters. They wanted someone who had a really, a firm grounding in character. And I think that if nothing else, One Night in Miami, to Pete, I mean, I'm not trying to speak for him, but I think they saw in my character the very distinct characterization of those guys in One Night in Miami potential to, help them out on Soul. Again, I came in never expecting to go as far as I did with that film and go from like a 12-week contract writer to, the writer and co-director of the film. Like that happened very organically. I just think it was one of those rare, it was almost like, no pun intended, it was like a Hollywood story. It was an unusually perfect fit. There was something about being outside of Los Angeles because Pixar's up in Emeryville in Northern California. You're kind of removed from the day-to-day politics of all this stuff. You're almost like in kind of an art camp. You're surrounded by other writers who are also working on their films. And a lot of those other writers were playwrights. I can't say their names because their films haven't been announced yet, but there were actually several other playwrights up there also working on movies. And, a couple of them I already knew. So it was this weird kind of like art camp with all these writers who were each doing a Pixar movie. And it was, and you have the brain trust, you're bouncing ideas off of people in a way that it had never been so beneficial to me as it had been being a part of that Pixar process. So it was just a perfect fit.
Yeah. Now, had to be a very different experience because you've got just input and collaboration coming at you from all sides there, right?
Right.
Was it their story? Did they bring it to you, or did they say, we have an idea? How did that work?
It was Pete Docter's story. I mean, Pete had the original idea, and it had already gone through several permutations before I even gotten there. I think in the original version, that they didn't even get to script with, it was a white actor who had just got cast in Death of a Salesman on Broadway, and then he dies. So it was very, very different. But then I think Pete came across this really cool quote from Herbie Hancock that kind of was a light bulb moment for him, in which he decided to make it the main character a jazz musician. And in making the character a jazz musician, it felt only right that he be a black man, you
Sure.
know. And so, and I think they had just gotten to that point where they were working through it, but there was I like to say there were the bones were there, but there was no meat on the bones yet. So it wasn't even like full length. It was like 40 minutes long. You know, there was no third act. There were, you know, holes, and like, you know, it was still in that very, very developmental stage, which I saw as a wonderful opportunity, because it was like, it's not like you're just coming in to punch up a script with some witty dialogue or banter. You're a part of the process of breaking this story. You're a part of like, and I didn't realize just how much of myself I was going to get an opportunity to put into this film until I really got there. I was really prepared to be like, okay, just, you know, do exactly what I need to do and get on out of here and hopefully have a really good experience. But to their credit, I mean, they really invited me into so much more from day one. Everything from casting to editorial to designs, you know, photog DP, you know, like everything from the very beginning. So they really made me feel welcome and made me a real part of the process.
That's so cool. I stumbled across on Disney Plus. There's a wonderful like 30-minute short of you talking about the process.
Yeah.
And I loved the story that you told about sort of a late in the game decision to add a scene with the barber shop.
Yeah, yeah, that was yet again one of those many opportunities I had. Like, if I had an idea, I would just like shoot Pete an email in the middle of the night, and I'd be like, "Look, this has been on my mind." What I loved about it, Pete, as opposed to saying like, you know, I don't know, like even if he had doubts about whether the idea had merit, which I think he did in the case of the barbershop, he's like, "Why don't you write it? You know, and let's see what you come up with." So you always have these opportunities to prove your ideas in execution. Proving them is really, really hard. And that damn barbershop scene, by the 40th time I'd rewritten it, I was kind of wishing I had never pitched the idea. You know what I mean? Because you have to, proving the idea involves iterating, you writing and rewriting and rewriting. And every time people are poking holes in it. So you got to like get the scene watertight in this environment that it's really hard to get stuff watertight. But, you know, it's up to you to have the passion to really push it through. And for me, that scene and the idea of like Joe Gardner, the main character, passing through authentic black spaces like a barbershop and seeing black hair and like putting it on display in this movie was too important not for me not to really push and push and push and fight until I got it right.
That's it's I can't wait. And it's dropping Christmas
December
Day
25th. Yeah, Christmas Day.
on Disney Plus.
Yes.
Nice. How many times have you seen it already?
I've lost track. I don't know. I mean, I've lost count. Yeah, a lot.
You have a son, right?
Yeah, and a daughter, both.
And a daughter. Do they think you're the coolest dad in the world?
I don't know.
You're better.
I don't know, man. You'd have to ask them. Doesn't seem like they do, but but I don't know.
When you watch the movie, when we watch the movie, is there a quintessential Kemp Powers moment that you can say that's me, that came out of my life, that
In Soul, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah, I'd say in addition to the barbershop, there's a scene with Joe. I'd say you'll know the scene. It's the scene with his mother, two-thirds of the way through the film in her tailor shop.
Okay.
That's a very personal scene. That, you know, it was actually the first scene I started writing when I came on board, and it was another one that went through a lot of iterations. And it's the scene where he has a heart-to-heart with his mom. That's pretty personal.
Nice. So what happens next? What are you working on now?
I can't share, but I've got a few projects I'm already kind of, you know, it's weird to have to be promoting these films because, you know, they've been done for a little bit. You know, Soul was supposed to come out in June and it got pushed to Christmas. So I'm kind of already like deep in the weeds on the next things. So you know, so I'm right back where I was in this kind of collaborative environment, working my ass off and trying to figure out a way to do some more work that hopefully doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and still doing my plays. I mean, I was really lucky in that Center Theater Group recently invited me to. They were going to, I think, cancel their annual new play festival reading at the Kirk Douglas, but they decided to do it online. So mine was one of the plays, a new play that was one of the ones that was selected. So we did a pretty incredible recording of it, which I've never done before, where we had to have it COVID safe. We did rehearsals on Zoom. Then the actors all gathered with the director, Jennifer Chang, at the Kirk Douglas, spent the whole day recording it. And now it's being edited together so that it's going to be available for streaming, I think, in January. So, it's exciting. And, no matter how much um, time and energy I spend writing films and TV, which I do love, I'm always going to make time for writing new plays because they're different. They're very different. Each of those mediums is different, and they bring me a certain level of joy and satisfaction in different ways.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier you did the Hollywood thing for a while, and then you like came back and said, okay, theater.
Yeah.
Um, what what is your background? Like educationally, were you a did I was a journalism major. I assume you were a journalism major.
No, I studied English.
Okay.
I kind of fell. I honestly, I kind of fell into journalism just because when I was when I was a freshman in college, an English teacher just was really encouraging to me and encouraged me to write for the school paper, which I did. And I started writing for the school paper and really took to it. I did a lot of internships at magazines. I think the first internship I did in college was at Smithsonian Magazine. I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I was their first editorial intern. Like they hadn't had one before because I was just coming off another internship, and my boss, a mentor of mine, recommended me for Smithsonian Magazine, and they didn't have an internship program, so they kind of tailored it and created it so that I could spend time at the magazine. So I really, when you start, when the first internship you have is at such an amazing world class magazine, how can you not fall in love with it? So I was a happy magazine writer, coming out of college, and did that for many years. And again, like magazines turns as our business, our industry changed, monthly magazines turned into weekly newspapers, turned into daily newspapers, turned into news wires, turns into the internet. And I was fortunate in that I was always coming from a base skill set of just strong reporting. So I was able to work in all those different mediums, which even within journalism, there are differences. You know what I mean? It's hard to write short for a news wire when you're writing for a Reuters and you have 250 words,
Sure.
especially if you're accustomed to getting 5,000 words, and you have to, and so I really, prided myself on being able to write to the outlet. So I was also really successful as a freelancer the whole time because I when I pitched a publication, it was always after like I knew the publication really well and knew how to pitch specifically to an editor, all the ins and outs of it. So yeah, I really did enjoy that career, and honestly thought that was all I was going to be doing for my whole life, and would have been happy to do so. Again, it's just writing creatively was something I did as a hobby on nights and weekends, and it was just to satisfy the creative instinct. Like going back to college, at the same time that I was writing for the school paper, me and some buddies in the dorms started a comic book company, and I was writing comic books. So, you know what I mean? I always had this creative outlet that I did for fun the entire time I was being a professional journalist. And it's kind of one of those things, I think, when look, I'm from New York City, so theater has always been in the background for me. Theater is as much in my background as hip hop is. You know what I mean? It's like you can't grow up in New York and not be exposed to the Pap Theater. You know what I mean? To Broadway. But I always viewed those things as something that other people did that I enjoyed, but that I would never be able to do because again, there's all these like unofficial rules that people drill into your head, like, oh, if you didn't go and do a program at this university in playwriting, you can't be a playwright, which is not true. But it took me coming out to a place like Los Angeles, where I know it's a bit of a cliche, but there's basically no damn rules and running into other people who are like, yeah, why don't you just write a play? Well, I didn't study playwriting, but it's like, but I know theater, and I've been exposed to it for so many years and have read so many plays. Like my first trip to London when I was like 20 years old was to see a production of The Tempest at the Royal Shakespeare Company. Like I traveled out of the country the first time to go see a play. You know what I mean? Like that's, and you realize that like the passion was always there, but you believe what other people say, and people will often make statements that will make you feel like you don't belong. And I've become very accustomed to like being told over and over again that I don't belong in just about everything I've done. Because trust me, in many cases, being the only black face in a white newsroom, you're, without being explicit, you're made to feel like you don't belong either. So you get to a point where you just kind of have to like close out everyone and just do your damn work, you know? And if they want to deal, if they like it, if they want to do something with it, fine. If they don't, fine. But you're just plowing forward, you know? And so I kind of took on like a bulldozer kind of mentality with my writing, that I'm just going to write even if no one cares to read it.
Hear, hear. Words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Kemp, I can't thank you enough.
Of course. Sorry it was so hard to get a hold of me, and I've just
No. Do not apologize. I will be saying your name a lot in the next month or so and saying, I know this guy. So I thank you so much. Go have a great Sunday, okay?
Oh, my pleasure, man. Anytime. I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
All right. See you later.
The Dramatist Guild is the National Association of Playwrights, Composers, Lyricists, and Librettists. For the first time in a generation, our industry is undergoing a tectonic shift. If you're not a member, join today. Learn more at our website.